This is the story of Kim Dokja, who is the only reader of a novel called 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World. The novel has been written and published over 10 years, and Kim Dokja has read it all the way to the end. The novel suddenly turns into reality, and Dokja's life transforms completely. He goes from being a pathetic loser to an MC in no time, as uses his special knowledge of the story. The story begins with a young man reading the final chapter of a web novel called 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, also known as Tuza. His name is Kim Dokja. Dokja's name often confuses people because it sounds like it means only child, reader, or individualist in Korean. His father chose the name to make him strong and independent, but Dokja has been lonely and single his whole life. This defines who he is. Dokja is 28 years old and has attended a third-rate college. He now works as a contractor at a branch of a large company. That day, while riding the subway, Dokja reads a novel on his phone. Suddenly, a woman approaches him and makes a strange comment about him getting pulled into his phone. When Dokja looks up, he recognizes her. She is Sangha Yu, a woman from the HR department at his company. Dokja greets Sangha and notices she sits beside him. She explains she is heading home and mentions she got lucky because her team manager is away on a business trip. Dokja feels uneasy when she sits next to him. He finds it hard to believe he has run into Sangha, who is the most admired woman at work. Many men in the company seem to want her attention, and Dokja thinks she is far out of his league. Sangha explains that she usually rides her bike to work, but her bike was stolen, so she has to take the train instead. Dokja observes her more closely and understands why so many admire her, but he feels no connection between their lives. He believes his world is too different from hers. During the train ride, Dokja focuses on reading his novel, while Sangha practices learning Spanish. She notices his concentration and asks him about what he is reading. Her question surprises him, and he quickly puts his phone away. However, she catches a glimpse of the screen and seems excited. She mentions her interest in authors like Murakami Haruki and Raymond Carver. Dokja thinks that even if he explains, she would not understand. He cannot bring himself to tell her what he is reading. Dokja enjoys reading web novels, but he feels embarrassed about his hobby. However, the story he is reading, Tuza, holds a special place in his life. It is a long, epic tale that has been serialized for 10 years. Dokja started reading it as a teenager, and now, as an adult, he is about to finish it. Tuza has been with Dokja during the most difficult times in his life. He read it when he was bullied, when he failed his exams, and when he ended up at a third-rate college. He also read it during his military service, where he was assigned to dangerous tasks, and even now, when his job feels meaningless as he keeps getting transferred. The novel has a total of 3,149 episodes. In the beginning, it gained some popularity, but by chapter 50, Dokja was the only reader left. He feels like the story was written just for him. Since he could not afford to donate to the author, he once left a comment to thank them for the story. Realizing that Sangha is still waiting for his response, Dokja quickly changes the subject. He brings up the topic of their company contract, which is about to end soon. But then Dokja remembers that Sangha was promoted to a full-time position last month because of her hard work. Unlike her, he did not receive a promotion. He thinks that if life were a novel, Sangha would be the heroine. He wonders if he could ever be the main character in a story, but in a completely different genre. He imagines his life as something other than non-fiction, perhaps as a fantasy. However, Dokja knows the truth. The genre of his life is non-fiction, and he is not the protagonist in this story. He is just a reader who needs to live his own life. This realization also makes him think that Samba should pursue her own happiness too. He feels a little relieved after successfully steering the conversation away. Suddenly, Dokja receives a message from someone named TLS 123. The sender thanks him for reading their novel. Dokja wonders if this person could be author of Tuza. The sender appreciates Dokja's dedication to the story and asks for his email address to send a gift as a token of gratitude. After a few moments, Dokja receives the promised gift. The sender informs him that Tuza will start charging for its content at 7 p.m. When Dokja checks the time, it is 6:55 p.m., leaving him only 5 minutes. He looks at his phone to check if the novel's content is still there, but he finds nothing. This confuses him. He wonders if the content has been removed without warning. Suddenly, the subway lights go out and the train breaks down with a loud crash. A strange hissing noise fills the air as the train comes to a slow stop. The passengers immediately fear it might be a terrorist attack. Dokja checks on Sangha to ensure she is safe, and fortunately, she is unharmed. She grips his arm tightly, clearly frightened. Dokja tries to comfort her, suggesting that it is probably nothing serious. At that moment, he glances at his phone and sees the time. It is exactly 7 p.m. Dokja is lost in thought when the conductor suddenly announces that everyone must leave the train immediately. Both Dokja and Sangha feel uneasy, unsure of what is happening. Suddenly, a bright flash lights up the cabin, and a system message appears out of nowhere. The message states that the free service of the 8612 planetary system has ended and that the main scenario is now beginning. It was from that moment the genre of his life completely changed. Dokja observes the strange events unfolding and the opening lines of that novel echo in his mind. He struggles to believe it could be real, but the similarities are undeniable. Suddenly, a bizarre creature appears in midair. The creature, called a Dokkaebi, is dressed in straw and covered in hair. It does not resemble a fairy, angel, or devil, but seems like something entirely different. Dokja stares at the Dokkaebi in shock, while the other passengers whisper and speculate. Some people wonder what the creature is saying because they cannot understand its language. Others dismiss it as a trick, and a few even comment on its odd appearance. In that moment, Dokja realizes he is the only one who knows what is happening. He recognizes the Dokkaebi from the first chapter of Tusa. This creature is responsible for the tragedy described across thousands of episodes in the novel. Dokja's hand shakes as he grips his phone tightly, trying to process what is happening. The voice of Dokkaebi echoes through the cabin, asking if the passengers can hear it. The Dokkaebi casually explains that there is a minor glitch with the language patch, as if this is a perfectly normal situation. The passengers, however, are far from calm. One man steps forward, asking the Dokkaebi what it is trying to pull, and jokingly wonders if it's part of some movie production. Another impatient passenger complains that he has an interview to attend and can't afford to waste time. 3 others march up to the Dokkaebi, demanding it restart the train immediately. The cabin fills with noise as more passengers begin shouting, their frustration and confusion taking over. The Dokkaebi, clearly annoyed, tries to get everyone to calm down and listen, but the commotion only grows louder. Meanwhile, Dokja observes the scene unfolding before him. The events are painfully familiar, matching the storyline of Tusa almost word for word. He feels a sense of urgency, knowing exactly how this situation will end if it continues. Dokja wants to intervene and stop the passengers from making things worse, but he hesitates, unsure of how to handle the chaos. He quietly tells Sangha to stay put, knowing she will be safer that way. As more passengers continue complaining, the Dokkaebi finally loses its patience. With a terrifying outburst, it unleashes its power, instantly causing the heads of several people to burst. The sudden violence leaves the remaining passengers frozen in fear. Blood spreads rapidly across the floor, and the once noisy cabin falls into an eerie silence. The Dokkaebi coldly informs them that this is not a movie, a dream, a book, or even the real world. Its tone is so matter-of-fact that it only deepens the horror for those who survive. Dokja feels his disbelief slowly fade as the gruesome reality sinks in. He doesn't want to accept it, but the scene in front of him leaves no room for doubt. This isn't a joke or an illusion. Everything is real, and it is just the beginning of the nightmare. Dokja feels like Neo from The Matrix, slowly piecing together the cracks in his understanding of reality. He observes the events, questions them, and eventually has no choice but to accept the truth. As much as he doesn't want to believe it, he realizes there's no escaping the conclusion. Tusa has somehow become reality. The Dokkaebi's menacing expression becomes sharper as it speaks, pointing out that the passengers have been living comfortably until now. They have enjoyed basic things like breathing, eating, and reproducing, all without paying a price. Its tone grows colder as it declares that the free ride is over and nothing in life comes without a cost. Fear spreads across the passengers' faces as they realize they have no idea how to handle the situation. Suddenly, one man steps forward with an unusual amount of bravery, or perhaps sheer stubbornness, despite the bloody scene they just witnessed. Dokja and Sangha recognize him as Myango Han, a familiar face. Myango, in a confident and almost absurd display of courage, asks the Dokkaebi if money will solve the problem. He starts offering amounts going up to millions, claiming he can pay whatever it takes if the Dokkaebi will let him go. The Dokkaebi doesn't seem amused. It explains that money is nothing more than a piece of plant fiber, a symbol humans use to agree on value within their own small boundaries of space and time. With a flick of its fingers, the Dokkaebi sets the check Myango offers ablaze, the flames consuming it in seconds. The Dokkaebi warns him not to try something so foolish again unless he wants his head to explode like the others. Turning back to the rest of the passengers, the Dokkaebi declares there is no time for meaningless chatter. It points out that their debt is piling up as they waste precious moments. Instead of explaining further, the Dokkaebi dismissively says it will be faster for them to learn the truth themselves. As the Dokkaebi speaks, its horns grow longer, adding to its menacing appearance. In that instant, a glowing status window appears out of thin air. It states that channel by 7623 is opened and announces that constellations are now logging in. The passengers stare in confusion as the system message pops up in front of everyone, including Dokja. He focuses on the screen, his heart pounding as it declares that the main scenario has officially begun. The main scenario is called Prove Your Value. The objective is simple but horrifying: to kill at least one living thing. Before disappearing in a burst of blinding light, the Dokkaebi leaves the passengers with a sarcastic wish for good luck, its sinister grin making the moment even more chilling. It adds that it expects an amazing story from them, clearly enjoying their fear and confusion. The passengers react in all sorts of ways. Some rush to the train doors, desperately trying to escape, while others frantically call the police. Sangha tries calling as well, but no one answers. Frustrated and scared, she turns to Dokja, asking him what they should do. Dokja remains surprisingly calm, though it's clear he's thinking hard. He tells Sangha to stay composed and reminds her of a game she once played, one where only a few people survive the end of the world. Sangha stares at him, completely confused, and asks what that has to do with their current situation. Dokja explains that they should think of themselves as players in a game. To survive, they must learn and follow the rules. Even after hearing this, Sangha doesn't fully understand what Dokja is trying to say, but she can tell he is taking this seriously. The scene inside the train is grim and surreal. The floor is littered with bodies as if they were discarded trash. Office workers sit trembling in blood-stained clothes, their eyes wide with terror. An old woman sits in a corner, clutching her hands together as she prays desperately. The boundaries between reality and fantasy seem to blur completely in this moment. Dokja closes his eyes and tries to focus. He needs a plan, something that will help them survive. As he thinks, another man steps forward, trying to take control of the chaotic scene. The man speaks loudly and confidently, urging everyone to stop panicking. He warns that even small disturbances could lead to more casualties in a national emergency like this one. The passengers are not pleased with the man taking charge. Many demand to know who he is. The man calmly shows his identity card and introduces himself as Hyeonsong Lee, an army lieutenant from Unit 6502. Dokja expected the situation to escalate into a national emergency, so this revelation doesn't surprise him. What shocks him, though, is something else entirely. Dokja realizes he knows this man, even though they have never met in real life. He recognizes the name from Tuza. Hyeonsong is one of the novel's supporting characters. Seeing someone from the story come to life leaves Dokja in disbelief. Hyeonsong is supposed to appear after the first scenario in the novel, not during it. Dokja begins to feel uneasy, wondering why events are happening out of order. He thinks that if he could reread the novel, he might understand what is going on. Before he can make sense of it, someone in the cabin shouts that the Prime Minister is speaking live on television. Everyone falls silent as the broadcast begins. The Prime Minister declares a high-level emergency, but before he can say more, his head suddenly explodes. The horrifying sight leaves the passengers frozen in shock. Moments later, the Dokkaebi reappears, casually reminding everyone that this isn't a prank or a terrorist attack. It announces that the difficulty of the scenario will now increase. It shortens the time limit to 10 minutes and warns that if no one dies within 5 minutes, it will kill everyone in the cabin. Dokja watches the chaos unfold, feeling a strange mix of familiarity and unease. The sequence of events matches the beginning of Tusa perfectly, yet something feels off. He can't shake the feeling that something crucial is missing. He begins to wonder why the novel's main character has not appeared yet. If Hyeonsong Lee, a major supporting character, is already here, then the protagonist should also be present. Dokja thinks carefully, trying to remember the sequence of events. If he is right, the main character should appear soon. Before he can dwell on it further, the cabin behind them suddenly explodes. The sound of the blast is deafening and the passengers scream in terror. Someone yells that people are being killed. A young man rushes to block the door, hoping to stop the chaos from spilling into their cabin. However, he collides with an invisible barrier. A system message appears, informing everyone that no one can leave or enter the cabin until the scenario is completed. Meanwhile, on the live broadcast, the Dokkaebi appears again, clearly amused. It comments on how some cabins are far more lively than others, enjoying the unfolding panic. To make its point, it decides to show the passengers what will happen if they fail to act within the next 5 minutes. The screen switches to a live stream of students in their classroom. Just as their time limit runs out, a horrifying scene plays. One by one, the students at Taepong Girls' High School are brutally murdered. Dokja cannot bear to watch and closes his eyes, overwhelmed by anger and disgust. However, the feed lingers on one girl, Jai Lee, a sophomore in Class B. In a shocking act of desperation, she strangles her friend, becoming the only survivor of Channel Bay 23,515. The Dokkaebi laughs wickedly, thoroughly entertained by the gruesome turn of events. The passengers inside the train are paralyzed with fear. Even Sangha is visibly shaking, unable to comprehend what is happening. Despite the horrifying situation, Dokja remains calm. His mind races with questions, particularly about why the main character still hasn't appeared. Some events match Tusa perfectly, while others are entirely unfamiliar to him. Dokja instinctively checks his phone, hoping to find Tusa there. To his dismay, the novel is no longer available. Then a sudden thought strikes him, and he quickly opens the email sent to him earlier. To his surprise, he finds an attachment. When Dokja opens the file, he is stunned to see that it is the novel he has been searching for. The author has sent it to him as a gift. He briefly wonders if it is illegal, but the weight of the situation keeps him from lingering on the thought. A new system window appears, explaining that every character in Tusa is given a unique attribute and a skill tied to it. Dokja tries multiple times to open his own attribute window, but nothing happens. Dokja begins to worry as he tries to understand what is happening. If he cannot access his attributes window, he won't be able to learn what his attribute or skill is. Determined to find a solution, he decides to read the attached file from the email. As soon as he opens it, a system message appears, informing him that his attribute has been activated. It states that his reading speed has been enhanced. At first, Dokja is surprised by this discovery. His attribute, accelerated reading, feels underwhelming compared to what he had expected. However, he quickly realizes how useful it is. In less than a minute, he finishes reading the opening chapter of Tusa. Grateful for the ability, he starts to connect the dots. When Dokja notices he is in cabin 3807, an unsettling realization hits him. The events happening around him differ from what he remembers in the novel. He recalls that the protagonist of Tusa is supposed to be in cabin 3707, which is located right behind his current cabin. Dokja starts thinking about what the story says about cabin 3807. A specific line from the novel flashes in his mind. The protagonist looks into the chaos of cabin 3807 and only 2 people survive. His thoughts are interrupted when Nam-woon Kim, a teenager, violently lashes out at someone he had been arguing with. The sudden aggression draws everyone's attention. Sang-ga, visibly shaking, turns to Dokja, asking if they should intervene. Dokja feels a growing sense of dread. He knows the tragic outcome of cabin 3807 all too well. In the novel, the only survivors are Hyun-sung Lee and Nam-woon Kim, the same teenager now causing chaos. Dokja glances at Sang-ga and realizes the horrifying truth. If a story unfolds as written, everyone else in the cabin, including himself and Sang-ga, is doomed. Han steps forward, trying to stop Nam-woon from continuing his attack on the elderly woman. He pleads with Nam-woon to show some respect for the elderly, but Nam-woon's response is cold and unapologetic. He points to the screen displaying scenes of people killing each other and declares that the army will not save them. Someone must die, he says, and they need to decide who it will be. Nam-woon goes further, accusing the group of pretending to be morally superior. He says that they believe killing others to survive is wrong and inhuman. Normally, he admits he might agree with that, but this situation is different. He insists they now live in a world where survival depends on killing or being killed. In his mind, no one can be blamed for choosing to protect their own life. Now Moon tells the passengers to face reality. The world they once knew is gone, and they must adapt to the harsh new rules of survival. With his words, he breaks the fragile moral code that has held the group together, pushing them into a darker mindset. Hyun-sung watches the events unfold but cannot bring himself to intervene. He cringes as the passengers, one by one, begin to turn on the older woman. They attack her, their fear and desperation overpowering their humanity. Hyun-sung looks away, unable to face the horrifying scene. The countdown continues, and the passengers are fully aware of the grim reality. If no one dies within the next 5 minutes, every single one of them will be killed. In that moment, their most basic survival instincts take over, erasing any semblance of rational thought or compassion. Dokja stands apart from the chaos, observing everything as though it were happening in another world. He notices that the elderly woman, whose name he does not know, was not meant to survive in the original scenario. Dokja hesitates, knowing that if he interferes, it could disrupt the course of the story. Any significant changes might leave him with less of the original plot to rely on. Dokja questions his own decision to stay silent. He wonders if it is fair to let the woman die just so he can survive. As he hesitates, Sang-ga suddenly rushes toward the chaos, but Dokja quickly stops her. He warns her not to act recklessly because it is far too dangerous. Sang-ga knows this, yet her sense of justice pushes her forward. Dokja thinks to himself that some people are meant to stand out, no matter the situation or genre. However, he also knows that Saima cannot change the outcome of the scenario. She is not the heroine in this world, and her actions won't alter the story's course. Desperate to keep her safe, Dokja pleads with Sang-ga to stay where she is. He promises her that if she listens to him just this once, he will never bother her again. Dokja takes a deep breath, knowing that it is not the right time for him to step in. His hesitation is not because he fears Nam-woon or the others, more because he agrees with their savage actions. Dokja is waiting for something specific to happen. The scenario timer ticks down to 7 minutes and 32 seconds, and at that exact moment, a loud bang echoes from the back cabin. Smoke begins to fill the air, and Dokja knows the time to act has arrived. Without hesitation, Dokja dashes toward the commotion, his mind focused on one thing. Reaching Namwoon, he tackles him with enough force to send him flying across the cabin. Namwoon, now furious, shouts at Dokja, demanding to know why he interfered. Dokja doesn't answer. Instead, his attention is fixed on something else. He quickly finds a young boy holding an insect box. Without hesitation, Dokja grabs the box, gives the boy one of the bugs inside, and takes the rest for himself. Turning to the rest of the cabin, Dokja raises his voice, commanding everyone to stop. He points out that killing the elderly woman will not guarantee their survival. His words catch everyone's attention, and they all turn toward him. Dokja calmly reminds them of the Dokkaebi's instruction to kill one each. Then he asks them who they plan to murder next. Namwoon, unfazed, smirks and responds mockingly. He declares that losers like Dokja will be the next to die. Dokja confronts Namwoon, questioning the need to risk their lives when there is a way to survive without becoming murderers. He reminds everyone that the scenario does not require killing a human being. Instead, it says they need to kill one or more living organisms. To prove his point, he holds a bug in his hand and shows it to the others. At that moment, Dokja stands against the chaos spreading around him. A madness so intense had almost led someone to try killing an elderly woman. Despite this tension, a smile appears on his face. Dokja wonders about himself and whether he has always been the kind of person who acts this way. He crushes the bug in his hand and completes the first kill mission. The system rewards him with 100 coins. After receiving the reward, he throws the remaining insects from the box onto the ground. This action shocks the other passengers, causing many of them to panic. Namwoon asks why Dokja would throw the bugs away instead of letting others use them. Dokja answers calmly, saying there are only 3 bugs left in the box. Namwoon reacts with loud laughter, mocking Dokja. He accuses him of throwing the bugs away because not everyone on the train could survive. Dokja confirms this is true, which angers Namwoon further. Namwoon calls Dokja's actions ridiculous and says no one in their right mind would act like this. His expression becomes wild and sinister. He claims Dokja must be lying and insists that Dokja only wants to watch the others fight for survival. Dokja observes Namwoon closely and realizes that he enjoys seeing people suffer. Namwoon thrives in situations like this, full of cruelty and chaos. Suddenly, a character profile window appears in front of Dokja. It shows detailed information about Namwoon, including his attribute. Dokja learns that Namwoon's attribute is edgelord. Most edgelords in Tusa could not cope with the nightmare that had turned into reality. Many of them ended their own lives. Namwoon, however, was different. He earned the nickname Delusion Demon Kim Namwoon for a reason. Unlike others, he had been preparing for the end of the world for a long time. When it finally happened, he adapted to the chaos very quickly. Time for the main scenario is running out. Only 2 minutes and 59 seconds remain. Cabin 3707 is completely engulfed in flames. Inside the fire, a mysterious man dressed in black survives. His dark silhouette moves as he tries to enter cabin 3807. Meanwhile, Dokja and Namwoon exchange awkward looks. Namwoon, intrigued by his earlier response, suggests they work together. A system message appears, stating that Dokja now understands Namwoon's character better. Dokja immediately rejects the offer. He tells Namwoon that he prefers to work alone. Dokja knows that if he had raided Tusa, he might have made a different decision. However, as someone familiar with the story, he already knows Namwoon's true nature and what he will become in the future. Namwoon is disappointed by his refusal. Frustrated, he approaches the elderly woman who is barely breathing. Before Namwoon can act, Dokja grabs his hand to stop him. Namwoon turns to Dokja, angry and disgusted. He accuses Dokja of pretending to be a hero and declares his hatred for him. Namwoon's anger grows stronger. When he can no longer hold back, he strikes at Dokja. However, Dokja reacts instinctively, using his power. Namwoon's attack misses Dokja's head by a narrow margin. Dokja feels anger building up inside him, but before he can react, another attack comes from Namwoon. This time, Dokja blocks it with his hand. He notices that Namwoon's attribute, the edgelord skill called Grimdark Awakening Level 1, is now activated. Namwoon launches another attack, but it misses again and strikes the ground instead. Namwoon realizes the strength of his newly awakened power and begins laughing hysterically. Dokja observes him and thinks about why the protagonist of Tusa must have recruited someone like Namwoon, even though he's a psychopath. A system message appears, informing Dokja that his understanding of Namwoon Kim has increased again. Another system message follows shortly after. It tells Dokja that he has unlocked a skill called Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint at level 1. Dokja feels confused because he doesn't know what kind of skill this is or how to use it. The loud sounds of the fight between Dokja and Namwoon start to draw the attention of the passengers. Despite Namwoon's repeated attacks, he still cannot land a single hit on Dokja. Dokja notices a message appear, warning him that Namwoon is about to aim for his right shoulder. Dokja quickly dodges this attack. Another message follows, warning him of an incoming punch aimed at his face. The gap between Namwoon's fist and Dokja's face narrows to just inches, but Dokja manages to evade it again. Dokja falls to the floor, feeling the weight of the battle. Namwoon's anger reaches its peak. Dokja realizes that he cannot fight back against Namwoon. His only option is to dodge and survive. He knows that if he can endure just a little longer, the scenario will end. Dokja looks at Namwoon and informs him that only 2 minutes remain before the main scenario concludes. Dokja notices that the old woman is still lying on the ground. He realizes that if she dies, Namwoon will clear the scenario. Acting quickly, Dokja grabs her and tries to roll away to stop Namwoon from succeeding. However, Dokja does not realize that Namwoon is waiting for this exact moment to catch him off guard. Thanks to his skill, Dokja senses that Namwoon is planning to aim for his heart. He manages to avoid serious harm, and the only injury he gets is a scrape on his shoulder. Namwoon's attack misses and hits the floor instead. Dokja then carries the grandmother away, leaving Namwoon frustrated as he watches them. Dokja thinks about survival. He believes that if he loses to Namwoon, he will die because only the strongest survive. He sees this as the unchanging rule, both before and after the world changed. He decides he must follow that same rule. Namwoon urges Dokja to act quickly since time is running out. Dokja responds by asking if an insect egg counts as a living organism. Namwoon, confused, questions him. Dokja calmly confirms his point and takes out the grasshopper's body from his pocket, the one he killed earlier. A popping sound is heard and a fluid spills out from the grasshopper's body. The disgusting liquid spreads over Dokja's hand as a message appears. The message informs him that he has killed a living organism and earned 100 bonus coins as additional compensation. Namwoon, enraged, lunges at Dokja in anger, demanding to know how he was supposed to know the answer. The attack comes fast and is difficult to avoid. A system message appears asking Dokja if he wants a tutorial on using coins. Dokja skips the tutorial because he already knows how coins work. Instead, he invests 2,700 coins to boost his stamina. His stamina level rises from 1 to 10, and his strength and endurance improves significantly. Namwoon tries again to stab Dokja in the heart, but his attack fails. Namwoon steps back immediately, confused about what just happened. Dokja stares directly at Namwoon and declares that he is not the one who will die. Namwoon is. With less than 1 minute left in the scenario, Namwoon launches a relentless series of attacks. Dokja remains steady and unshaken, showing no fear. The time runs out, marking the end of the scenario. Shortly after, the Dokkaebi appears, looking fascinated by the mess they are in. The Dokkaebi wonders what in the world has happened here. At the end of the first main scenario, only 5 survivors remain. They are Hyeonsong Lee, Sanbae-yu, Jiliong Lee, Myeongo Han, and Dokja Kim. Dokja looks down at Namwoon's lifeless body and recalls the moment when Namwoon begged him for help. Dokja had refused to help him. And as the time ended, Namwoon's head exploded, just like the heads of the others who failed the scenario. Dokja realizes that he could have saved more people. He knows it would be dishonest to say he feels no guilt. However, he is surprised by how calm he feels. It almost seems as if he is reading a story, not living through these events. He notices his reflection in the darkened window of the train. At first, he thinks the blood is on his face, but then he understands it is actually smeared on the glass. Dokja learns that killing non-resistant organisms cuts his coin rewards in half. Even so, he gains 6,200 coins in total, though 2,700 were already spent to improve his stats. He finally accepts the truth. The world he once knew is gone. A new world has been born, and he is the only one who knows how this story will end. The subway train comes to a stop near Dongho Bridge. Some of the survivors stand and look outside. The view reveals a ruined Seoul with collapsed buildings. In the Han River, giant snake-like monsters are devouring the remains of a crashed fighter jet. Dokja immediately recognizes these creatures. They are ichthyosaurs, monsters often called sea serpents in the world of Tusa. One of the ichthyosaurs turns its gaze toward the train. Some of the survivors react with fear. Dokja, however, remains indifferent as the creature approaches. He understands these monsters are not a threat to them. In the world of Tusa, scenarios are the highest priority. Creatures like the ichthyosaurs do not attack unless they are directly part of a scenario. The Dokkaebi feels immense joy as he counts the stars that appear around him. These stars represent how many constellations have subscribed to his channel. Dokja notices this and thinks the Dokkaebi is overwhelmed with happiness. For a new Dokkaebi, having 21 viewers is a significant achievement. In the world of Tusa, constellations are mysterious and powerful beings. They observe events from distant nebulas and are the masterminds behind the chaos. They are the ones watching the scenarios broadcasted on the Dokkaebi's channel. Dokja remembers that in the original story, Namwoon had killed almost everyone in the cabin. This time, Dokja's actions have changed that outcome. However, he knows that some constellations are angry because of his interference. He picks up Namwoon's knife and reflects on how things have changed. Just one day ago, their roles were reversed, and now the constellations are watching him instead. A system message appears, stating that several constellations admire the way Dokja handled the scenario. They reward him with 500 coins. Dokja understands that while some constellations dislike him, others are starting to support him. He thinks about the constellations and hopes they all enjoy the events, knowing that they will eventually pay the price for their entertainment with their own lives. Manga approaches Dokja and asks if he is okay. He responds by apologizing because he could not save the old woman. Manga looks worried and seems like she wants to say something, but she stops herself. Dokja notices and asks her what it is. She hesitates and dismisses it, saying, "It is nothing." Instead, she thanks Dokja for throwing the cage toward her earlier. Dokja responds that what happened earlier was a coincidence and will not happen again. He cannot tell exactly what Manga is thinking, but he believes she is smart enough to survive in this chaotic world. He feels confident that she probably understands his words. Dokja reflects on his decisions and acknowledges that his choices caused some people to survive while others died. He does not feel deserving of the gratitude from those who made it through. However, he admits to himself that having 5 survivors is more than he expected. He then turns his attention to the boy, Jillian Lee. Dokja remembers the moment he gave the insect to the child. Realizing the dangers of the world, Dokja asks the boy if he wants to live. When Jillian nods, Dokja tells him they should team up. Dokja admits to himself that his actions are not driven by sympathy. If he had to name his true motive, he would call it hypocrisy. A status window appears showing that a few constellations are impressed with Dokja's actions. As a reward, they send him 200 coins. Dokja thinks that pretending to care might be a low move, but he justifies it because he also wants to survive. Knowing what lies ahead, he decides that gaining the attention of the constellations is crucial for his survival. The Dokkaebi comments on how many interesting things have happened during the day. He also mentions that someone in the next cabin is completely insane. Myongo Han, one of the survivors, asks the Dokkaebi if they will now be allowed to leave since they have done everything required in this scenario. Dokja observes Myongo and wonders why someone as wealthy as him is even taking the subway. It seems out of character for someone like Myongo to be in such a situation. The Dokkaebi responds with a sly smile and asks Myongo if he is sure about wanting to leave. Myongo, looking at the monsters outside, is left speechless and unable to answer. The Dokkaebi seems impressed by the fact that so many people survived the first scenario in this cabin. The Dokkaebi announces that every difficulty deserves a reward. He explains that the reward for completing the first scenario is the ability to receive sponsorships from constellations. Most survivors react with confusion, but Dokja stays calm. He is the only one who already knows about the sponsorship system. The Dokkaebi warns them that they are still very weak. He tells them they wouldn't even survive an encounter with a weak ground mouse, let alone a kruk, if they continue in their current state. However, he adds that there are powerful beings in this world who feel pity for them and want to sponsor them. Dokja notices that he has 4 sponsors to choose from: Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, Demonic Judge of Fire, Secretive Plotter, and Prisoner of the Golden Headband. Manga calls out to him, mentioning that 2 strange options have suddenly appeared on her own interface. To avoid raising suspicions, Dokja lies and says he does not know anything about it. He suggests she think of the process as an aptitude test. The sponsor selection is a system in which constellations, watching through the Dokkaebi channel, choose humans they want to support as avatars. In his case, 4 constellations have shown interest in sponsoring him, though their real names remain hidden. Dokja compares his situation to the protagonist in Tusa, who initially had 5 sponsor options. 4 options seem significant, and he is not disappointed. He knows that the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon leads the faction called Black Cloud. This constellation grants its avatar exceptional attack power, making it the strongest choice for early scenarios that demand physical strength and combat ability. However, Dokja also knows the risks. The more this constellation's power is used, the more it corrupts the mind of his avatar. Over time, its contractor would lose control and become a violent murderer. This constellation usually supports edgelord attributes. Feeling uneasy about the risks associated with this constellation, Dokja decides to exclude it. The second option, the Demonic Judge of Fire, amazes Dokja. At first glance, the name suggests a demonic being. However, Dokja knows this is misleading. Despite the word demonic, the constellation is not a demon. The combination of fire and judge reveals its identity. It is Archangel Uriel, who passes judgment through flames. The third option, secretive plotter, catches Dokja's attention. This constellation is unfamiliar to him. Dokja realizes he might understand its nature if he had read more of Tuza. The fourth and final option is the prisoner of the golden headband. Dokja is shocked to see this constellation appear so early. He doubts his own eyes several times before accepting that it is real. At first, the name seems negative. However, Dokja focuses on the proper noun, golden headband, known as the smallest prison in the world. Fans of Journey to the West would recognize this constellation as Sun Wukong, the handsome monkey king, also called the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal. Sun Wukong is famous for his golden gaze and fiery eyes. As the selection time nears its end, Dokja decides not to choose any constellation. His reasoning is simple. He knows that sponsor contracts are never fair deals. Furthermore, he is aware that there are ways to become strong without relying on a constellation. When the sponsor selection ends, the Dokkaebi announces that someone has made an unusual choice. For a brief moment, he looks directly at Dokja. The Dokkaebi then informs the survivors that they will have a short 10-minute break while he prepares the next scenario. After the Dokkaebi disappears, Dokja tells the others to gather around. Although hesitant at first, they eventually comply. Hyeonsong Lee is the first to step forward. He introduces himself to Dokja and shakes his hand. Dokja notices that Hyeonsong has a firm grip, but he is not surprised by this. After all, Hyeonsong was the tanker in the early stages of Tuza. This made Dokja want to recruit him. Hyeonsong praises Dokja for his earlier actions, saying they would likely have died without his intervention. Before Dokja can respond, Myeongo suddenly grabs his shoulder and questions how Dokja knows him. Dokja responds by calling him by his name, which surprises Myeongo. Myeongo insists that Dokja should address him more formally as Mr. Han, but Dokja points out that they are no longer in a workplace environment. Myeongo continues rambling nonsense until Dokja firmly tells him to stop and focus on the reality of their situation. Dokja realizes it is not just Myeongo who needs to wake up, everyone does. He states that the situation is no joke, and by now they all must understand how serious it is. Hyeonsong adds that what they are experiencing feels similar to a novel he once read during night shifts. He still struggles to believe it is real and wonders if it might be a dream. He then asks Dokja if he has any idea what they should do next. Dokja responds that their priority is to leave the subway. His statement shocks the survivors. As they react, a loud roar from the sea monster echoes through the window, adding to their fear. Some start complaining, calling Dokja's idea crazy. Before they can continue, a loud boom comes from the other side of the subway door, cutting through their protests. The survivors freeze, confused and terrified, wondering what is happening. Dokja considers the possibility that the next scenario has already started, but quickly dismisses the idea since the Dokkaebi has not yet returned. He concludes that the person on the other side of the door must be the sole survivor of subway cabin 3707. The door shakes violently as a black boot slams against it repeatedly. Dokja stares grimly at the door and feels certain about the identity of the person behind it. In his mind, it becomes clear. This is the true protagonist of the story. Dokja convinces Hyeonsong that they need to leave immediately. He warns that if they stay, they will all die before the next scenario begins. The relentless sound of the door being kicked adds urgency to his words. Hyeonsong hesitates, unsure if the person behind the door is truly an enemy. Dokja clarifies that the survivor behind that door is the one who killed everyone in their cabin and asks if anyone is eager to meet such a person. Hearing this, the group quickly starts searching for a way out. With the scenario over, the invisible force field blocking their escape has vanished. However, they still need to find a working door. 3 of the 8 doors in the cabin remain unchecked. Just as the menacing sound of the door being kicked grows louder, fear spreads through the group. Even Dokja feels uneasy as he watches the door from the next cabin, which looks ready to break open. Suddenly, Sangha finds a slightly open door. Hyeonsong points out that the door is broken, but Dokja asserts it is still their best option. He briefly glances at his status window and notes that he has 4,700 coins left. He considers spending coins but decides against it, knowing that using them too early could be risky. Instead, Dokja asks Hyeonsong to use his strength to open the door. To be sure, Dokja checks Hyeonsong's profile using his skill and feels relieved to see that Hyeonsong's supporting constellation attributes match what was described in the novel. Hyeonsong mentions owning a power, but is clear he has no idea how to use it. Dokja tells Hyeonsong to imagine himself using the power. Hyeonsong is doubtful but follows the suggestion. Hyeonsong grabs the door with his hands, his biceps swelling with effort as he forces it open. The scene reveals the power of the Great Mountain Push. Dokja knows that Great Mountain Push is not a skill but a stigma, a power granted by a constellation. However, to avoid drawing suspicion, Dokja deliberately uses the word skill when talking to Hyeonsong instead of calling it a stigma. A system notification appears stating that Hyeonsong has started to trust Dokja. It also mentions that Dokja's understanding of Hyeonsong's character has increased. After Hyeonsong opens the door, Dokja and the others rush toward the bridge. Dokja thinks about the steel door connecting to subway cabin 3707 and how it will likely break soon. However, he reminds himself that the steel door is not the real problem. Dokja's thoughts are interrupted when he sees the Dokkaebi floating in front of them. The Dokkaebi looks angry and accuses the survivors of not listening to him and leaving their cabin too early. He explains that he has not finished preparing for the next scenario. Myeong panics, clutching his head as if it might explode, and says they should have stayed inside. The Dokkaebi sighs, then snaps his fingers. He declares that he has no choice but to proceed since the survivors are already outside. A status window appears, announcing the start of the second scenario. The second scenario is an E difficulty sub-scenario. The goal is to cross the collapsing bridge and reach Oksu Station within 20 minutes. The reward for clearing the scenario is 200 coins, but the penalty for failure is a mystery. Without hesitation, Dokja starts running toward the station. Sangha hesitates and calls out to Dokja, pointing out that the bridge has not collapsed yet. Dokja tells her not to worry and to focus on running. He knows she is right. The bridge is still intact. However, he also understands the scenario description. The bridge is not broken yet, but it will break. The Dokkaebi had given them a preparation time of 10 minutes, but they escaped 3 minutes earlier. Dokja observes the group as they run. Hyeonsong leaves with Gilleong beside him. Dokja notes that Hyeonsong is incredibly strong, a natural powerhouse who has not even invested coins in his stats. Yet the combined strength, physique, and agility of Hyeonsong exceeds 23. Myeong runs next with Sunma following behind him. Dokja stays at the rear, keeping an eye on the group. He thinks they might have a chance to reach the station in time. Suddenly, Myeong notices something in the water. A whirlpool forms, and from it emerges a massive sea monster, a sea serpent, or perhaps even a sea commander, based on its enormous size. The ichthyosaur roars loudly, sending chills through the group. Dokja thinks to himself that the ichthyosaur, having never targeted avatars earlier in the story, must have appeared to destroy the bridge. He estimates that they are about 200 meters away from the bridge and should be able to reach it before it collapses given their speed. However, Dokja feels uneasy. The Dokkaebi has other plans. The Dokkaebi announces that the game would not be fun if it were too easy. So he decides to change the scenario's difficulty from E to D inside the train cabin. A black aether, the wicked thoughts of the dead, begins to possess the dead bodies and bring them back to life. Soon after, there is a noise and Sangha is the first to notice it. Zombie-like figures start appearing in large waves. Some of them are people who were in the same carriage as the survivors. Hansong and the kid manage to reach Oksu Station safely, but they worry for Dokja and the others, who are now surrounded by zombies. A distant roar interrupts their thoughts. Dokja looks up and immediately orders everyone to get down. At that moment, the ichthyosaur takes a massive bite out of the bridge, completely severing it. Samna calls out to Dokja as he struggles to stand. When he regains his balance, he is shocked to see the bridge has been destroyed. He is, however, surprised that Myeong and Sangha have survived. Dokja notices the kid and Hyeonsong shouting something, though he cannot hear them. He wonders what will happen next when a message suddenly appears. It states that someone has received the favor of a constellation and activated Deus Ex Machina. At that moment, a brilliant bridge made of light forms across the remnants of the collapsed Dongo Bridge. The bridge in front of them was the bridge of even numbers, which could only be crossed by an even number of people. If an odd number of people tried to cross, the bridge would collapse. Sangha suddenly told Dokja that something had appeared on her head. Dokja was in awe, wondering if Sangha's supporting constellation had made a risky move by intervening in the scenario. However, Dokja knew that such interventions were rare even in Tuza. He wondered what kind of constellation could be supporting her. So he decided to take a look at Sangha's character profile. But when he checked, he found that he couldn't access it, indicating that Sangha had a special constellation supporting her, one that also provided her with a mental barrier. Sangha then shouted at him, snapping his attention to the situation. Dokja instinctively leaned forward just as a familiar bloody fist covered in energy flew through the air, narrowly missing his head. Without thinking, he kicked the attacker, sending them flying several feet away. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. Dokja instantly recognized the attacker. A Tier 9 humanoid demon. A demonic person. These were human mutants infected with black aether. While demonic people were similar to zombies, they were much more dangerous if their hosts had significant power. And of all people, it had to be Namwoon. Dokja quickly activated his Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint skill. But when he tried to target the demon, he found that it had no consciousness, so his skill was automatically deactivated. In turn, Dokja was slow to dodge the attack, and he felt a sharp pain as the demon's claws scratched his left arm. The pain intensified, but there was no time to react. His only focus now was to somehow get across the bridge of even numbers. However, with 3 people on the bridge, they were already at a disadvantage. Dokja turned around about to speak when he saw Manga carrying Sanga. He froze, dumbfounded by the sight. Manga immediately ran off, leaving Dokja behind. His anger flared. He couldn't believe Manga had abandoned him like this. A system message suddenly appeared, stating that the secretive plotter was impressed by how easily Dokja could be tricked. Meanwhile, the demonic judge of fire was moved by Dokja's selflessness and gifted him 100 coins. Frustrated, Dokja tried to use his character profile skill on Manga, but it still didn't work. It was then that he realized Manga and Sanga weren't characters from Tuza. The rules of the game didn't apply to them. Just then, Zombie Namwoon roared, summoning hordes of zombies to swarm Dokja. The zombies charged at him, and he had to think quickly. How could he cross the bridge while fighting them off? He considered dragging a demon across the bridge with him, but he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing it was unlikely to work. A sudden notification flashed in his vision. Only 15 minutes remained until the scenario ended. The Dokkaebi, watching the chaos unfold, casually observed Dokja's struggle. The Dokkaebi then commented that Dokja was doing well and offered constellations to help him, but none responded. As Dokja fought with all his might against the zombies, his friends watched from the distance, concern evident on their faces. His strength was fading, and soon he found himself cornered. If he stepped back, he would fall into the sea. If he moved forward, he'd be facing the horde of zombies head-on. Trapped in his predicament, Dokja realized that this might be the end. He couldn't help but think that it wouldn't have been so difficult if he had just one combat skill. Suddenly, a system message flashed across Dokja's vision, stating that his bookmark skill had been activated. A massive book-like hologram materialized before him, and he stared at it, wondering what purpose the bookmark served. A new message popped up listing the bookmark characters: Delusional Demon Namwoon, Steelblade Hyeonsong Lee, and an empty slot. Dokja frowned. He had read over 3,000 episodes of Tusa, but he had never encountered any mention of a bookmark skill. Despite his confusion, his instincts kicked in, and he quickly grasped how it worked. Just then, Zombie Namwoon roared and charged at him, followed closely by the other zombies. In response, Dokja didn't hesitate. He activated bookmark number 1. A system message appeared, notifying him that the activation time had been shortened due to his low understanding of Namwoon's character. But it was enough. Dokja successfully activated Grimdark Awakening Level 1. He tightened his grip on his knife just as Zombie Namwoon lunged at him. With one swift motion, Dokja unleashed the skill, and the zombie version of Namwoon fell in a single strike, killed with a devastating blow. The zombie let out a horrified scream before whispering, "He doesn't want to die." Dokja watched in silence as Namwoon's body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. A message flashed indicating that Dokja's understanding of Namwoon's character had increased and the bookmark skill deactivated. With only 10 minutes and 11 seconds remaining, the hordes of zombies closed in around Dokja, but he had never intended to deal with them alone. Though a bit late, the protagonist's timely entrance was something he'd been waiting for. In the distance, a deafening explosion rang out, a sound Dokja had been anticipating. The zombies paused, sensing something was wrong, and began to turn in the direction of the blast. But it was too late. The zombies were sent flying in a straight line, as if a tank had plowed through them, clearing the way. Dokja smirked as he saw the source of the destruction. A man in all black, walking calmly through the chaos. Joonghyuk, the man in the black robe, strolled toward Dokja with a cold, commanding presence. His golden eyes glinted menacingly as he asked him who is he. A chill ran down his spine. Dokja knew he wouldn't stand a chance if it came to a confrontation with Joonghyuk. Reacting instantly, Dokja activated his profiling skill. Before he could process any more, Joonghyuk raised his hand, effortlessly grabbing Dokja by the neck. Dokja was completely at his mercy, suspended over the edge of the bridge, his breath cut off. Joonghyuk asks him how he was still alive. Dokja struggles to free himself from Joonghyuk's strong grip. He realizes that he is the living proof of the first method in Tusa. He knows Joonghyuk as the regressor, the person who will start the events that will turn the world upside down. While this happens, on the other side of the broken bridge, Hyeonsong tries to understand what is happening. However, he cannot get through because there is a barrier similar to the one in the subway. This makes Sanga worried about Dokja, who is still hanging in the air. Joonghyuk asks him again for his name, which makes Dokja think that Joonghyuk is really a self-centered protagonist. Finally, Dokja tells him his name. Joonghyuk says that his name is strange. Dokja decides to act smart, but this only leads to Joonghyuk punching him in the stomach. Dokja is surprised by the punch. Joonghyuk comments that Dokja has a strong body and says that Dokja has already figured out how to use the coins. When Dokja tries to talk back, he gets punched again. This makes Dokja wonder how Joonghyuk is so strong, especially since they have only finished one main scenario and are now working on a sub-scenario. Joonghyuk tells Dokja to stop talking and just answer the questions. Dokja feels this is the worst situation he could be in and hopes it never happens again. After 3 regressions, Joonghyuk has become the most dangerous character in Tusa. Joonghyuk asks Dokja once more if he will comply, and Dokja calmly replies, "Fine." Joonghyuk punches Dokja again, but this time Dokja blocks the punch. Joonghyuk is surprised that his punch has been stopped. They stare at each other for a moment, and Dokja smiles. He deliberately mentions his skills as a pro gamer. Then he tells Joonghyuk that he is younger, so Joonghyuk should show him some respect. This makes Joonghyuk wary of Dokja. He asks if Dokja knows him. Dokja lies and says he knows him because he worked at a game company. He also says Joonghyuk is pretty famous, and that he was one of his fans. Dokja knows that Joonghyuk's fame is just part of the story in the novel, but he isn't lying when he says he was once a fan. Dokja thinks about his complicated feelings toward Joonghyuk. He realizes he has mixed emotions having followed Joonghyuk through all 3,000 episodes. Joonghyuk responds that he hasn't heard that in a while and that he will forgive Dokja for being rude. However, Joonghyuk says this won't change anything. Dokja understands the situation. Joonghyuk tells him that he only has one question for him. How did he survive the subway? Dokja tries to think quickly about what he can say to make Joonghyuk let him live. A system message informs Dokja that his understanding of Joonghyuk has increased and he has now grasped his character. Another system message appears saying that Dokja has unlocked level 2 of his personal skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. When Dokja activates the skill, he is surprised to discover that he can now read Joonghyuk's mind. He hears that Joonghyuk will kill him if he is a threat. Dokja smirks, thinking he can use this new skill against Joonghyuk. He answers Joonghyuk's question, saying that he survived by clearing the scenario through killing insects. This surprises Joonghyuk. Dokja explains that he was lucky to have seen the kid with the bugs who had fallen due to the explosion in the cabin ahead of them. Joonghyuk begins to wonder if the future has changed. Joonghyuk thinks about his destroyed cabin with dead bodies on the floor. He believes the difference might be because he started by killing them with an explosion, unlike in his previous runs. Joonghyuk notices something strange about Dokja. As the world had turned upside down, Dokja is unusually calm. He concludes that he must have killed Namwoon, which makes him seem dangerous to Joonghyuk. Dokja then tells Joonghyuk to let him go if he's done with his questions and suggests they cross the bridge together to Oksu Station because time is running out. But Joonghyuk has another thought. Everything fits too perfectly. Golden light shines from his right eye. Dokja recognizes the skill Joonghyuk is using and becomes alert. He knows that the Eye of the Sage is a powerful skill. The best way to uncover someone's traits and secrets is the best detection skill. Joonghyuk grabs Dokja with both hands while Dokja wonders why he's not using the Eye of the Sage. He thinks it might be for the best since he doesn't even know his own attributes or skills. If Joonghyuk finds out, he would also want to know. Suddenly, a system message appears saying that Dokja's personal skill, the Fourth Wall, has been activated and blocked the Eye of Sage. This shocked Joonghyuk, and with only 2 minutes left in the sub-scenario, Joonghyuk asks aggressively what Dokja is. Dokja is shocked. He can't believe that he has a skill capable of blocking Eye of the Sage. Joonghyuk thinks he must kill Dokja now, but since Dokja can read his mind, he tells him to wait. Dokja is frustrated with himself for making things more complicated. He knows Joonghyuk will never believe him, so he changes his approach. He tells Joonghyuk that he needs a reliable ally and reminds him that he needs help to clear Scenario 46. Joonghyuk asks how Dokja knows about the scenario and if he is also a regressor. Dokja replies that it doesn't matter who he is right now. What matters is what he can do for Joonghyuk. Joonghyuk then realizes that Dokja isn't a regressor, since if he were, he would already know him. Dokja tells him that he knows the future, a future that Joonghyuk doesn't know. Hearing this, Joonghyuk quickly uses his skill to check for lies. The result shows that Dokja is telling the truth. Joonghyuk is shocked and steps back. He wonders if there is another prophet in Korea besides Anna Croft. The prophet trait is the only one in Tusa that allows someone to see the future and blocks detection skills from working. Dokja knows that only one person in the world of Tusa has the prophet trait. Joonghyuk asks Dokja if he can use future sight. Dokja gives a vague answer. When Joonghyuk asks if Dokja knew he would be there, Dokja confirms it. Meanwhile, the city behind them continues to burn and a sea monster swarms the river. Dokja tells Joonghyuk that he knows about his special power and what will happen in the future. In his memories, regressors live their lives repeatedly and know what will happen. However, they can influence their future by changing the present. Dokja then offers to be Joonghyuk's companion. Since Dokja is the only one who can read the story, he will act as Joonghyuk's prophet to help him understand the future better. Joonghyuk grits his teeth. He thinks that what Dokja says is true, not just for scenario 46, but also for fighting Zarathustra. However, he wonders if he can trust Dokja. Joonghyuk thinks about it for a long time, and with only 40 seconds left until the end of the scenario, he decides to make Dokja his companion. Suddenly, Joonghyuk grabs Dokja and drags him toward the bridge. Dokja coughs and tells him to let go, but Joonghyuk pulls him harder. They cross the broken bridge with the help of Deus Ex Machina. The zombies are growling as they cross. Meanwhile, Sangha, Hyungsung, and Jiliang wait for Dokja at the station. Joonghyuk keeps dragging Dokja by the collar of his shirt. Dokja feels relief knowing that he is safe again. He can't believe he managed to get the regressor to agree with him. Dokja is exhausted from focusing so hard, so his omniscient reader's viewpoint skill stops working on its own. Dokja feels anxious when he notices that his skill is being deactivated, but he quickly realizes that he has already done everything he could and has convinced Joonghyuk. He thinks that he is safe now because he has crossed the bridge. Behind the veil, Dokja's friend can see Joonghyuk stopping him and asking if he is a prophet, someone who can see the future. Dokja gets a bad feeling. His instincts tell him that something is wrong. Suddenly, Joonghyuk lifts him up and moves toward the end of the bridge. There, a sea monster waits, ready to eat him. Dokja's face changes as he feels fear. Joonghyuk asks if Dokja will let go and fall into the sea monster's mouth. In his mind, Dokja is sure that Joonghyuk is a psychopath. He closes his eyes tightly. Dokja believes that he is the only one who truly understands Joonghyuk, and he wonders if this Joonghyuk is the same one he has read about. Then he decides to speak. He tells Joonghyuk that he has something to say first, which surprises Joonghyuk. They stare at each other. Dokja says that since he is willing to team up with Joonghyuk, Joonghyuk should also promise to work with him. Joonghyuk gets what he wants. He asks Dokja for an answer. With a grin, Dokja calls him an idiot and tells him to let him go and go away. Joonghyuk lets go of Dokja's hand. Dokja falls with a loud scream. As he falls, he looks up and sees Joonghyuk standing at the edge watching him fall. Joonghyuk smiles and says he believes that Dokja is really a prophet. Dokja is shocked. Just before he is eaten by the sea monster, he smiles and curses Joonghyuk. The sea monster snaps its jaws with a loud sound. A notification appears saying that Dokja has failed to clear the scenario. Meanwhile, Dokja is drowning inside the sea monster's mouth. He struggles to hold his breath, knowing he must keep going and cannot faint. He manages to get out of the water, coughing and retching. He realizes he has made it to the monster's stomach without being torn apart or eaten. He then searches his inner pocket, still breathing heavily. When he finds his phone, he turns on the flashlight to see around him. To his horror, he sees a sea of dead bodies, cars, and pieces of the bridge. The inside of the monster's stomach is even worse than he imagined. Dokja swims towards a flat, floating stone and thinks to himself that Joonghyuk is a psychopath. Despite this, Dokja understands why Joonghyuk did it. Dokja believes that the word companion carries great weight for Joonghyuk. After failing his first round of regression, Joonghyuk has never had a real companion. He only sees humans as subordinates or enemies. Dokja thinks that this was probably a test, where Joonghyuk wanted him to prove himself as an equal. Dokja sits casually on the floating stone, closes his eyes, and checks his message log. There are several messages and a few constellations want to sponsor him. This might be because of the final conversation he had with Joonghyuk. Suddenly, the stomach of the sea monster shakes, signaling that it is moving. Dokja holds the stone tightly, startled by the sudden movement. Dokja remembers that, according to Tusa, the stomachs of ichthyosaurs start secreting acid 3 minutes after they eat. This means he doesn't have much time left. Suddenly, a bright flash appears behind him and the Dokkaebi arrives. Dokja is surprised by its appearance. Dokkaebi realizes that Dokja is not flustered at all, even in this dangerous situation. Dokja replies that he has been waiting for the Dokkaebi, which confuses it. Dokja looks at the Dokkaebi and thinks to himself that not only will he escape from the sea monster's stomach, but he will also gain the power to stand as Joonghyuk's equal. He believes that Joonghyuk will have no choice but to accept him as his companion. Meanwhile, on the edge of the bridge, Joonghyuk stands still and watches the sea monster swim away. After a while, he turns around and leaves. Back inside the sea monster's stomach, the Dokkaebi asks Dokja if he was really waiting for it. Dokja responds that he was. He then tells the Dokkaebi that it needs to take his coins as a penalty for failing the scenario. The Dokkaebi becomes even more confused. The Dokkaebi asks why Dokja wants to pay with coins instead of his life. Dokja explains that if the Dokkaebi was going to kill him, the punishment would have said death, not the mystery penalty. He adds that it means there is room for negotiation. Just then, the Dokkaebi's eyes turn red. However, the Dokkaebi laughs and tells Dokja that it is interesting and impressive how he managed to figure this out from such a small clue. It says that it is no wonder all the constellations are watching him. Then the Dokkaebi informs Dokja that the price to save his life is 5,100 coins. Dokja looks at the coins he has and realizes it is exactly the amount the Dokkaebi is asking for. He feels agitated. Dokja tells the Dokkaebi that the price is too high. The Dokkaebi responds that Dokja can die, then calmly says that if Dokja doesn't want to pay, they can end things right there. However, the Dokkaebi does not expect Dokja to dare to kill him. The Dokkaebi is shocked by what Dokja says as he challenges the Dokkaebi again to kill him. The Dokkaebi stands frozen, his eyes glowing red. Dokja tells him that he cannot kill him because he is attracting attention. He smiles, knowing that the constellations are watching and enjoying the scene, and that the Dokkaebi would not have come all the way there just to kill him. The Dokkaebi becomes angry and glares at Dokja, asking what he is trying to do. Dokja then calls in a low-grade Dokkaebi named Beyong. This stops the Dokkaebi from speaking. Dokja asks Beyong how his job as a streamer is going. Beyong trembles and stutters, asking how a human could know his name. But Dokja ignores him and continues, saying that his channel isn't doing well because the constellations have been cheap lately. The system sends a message telling Dokja that some constellations are curious about who he is. Then another system message appears, saying that Dokja's plan shines with the secretive plotter. Dokja whispers to Beyong, asking him to turn off the channel for a moment so they can talk. Beyong agrees and turns off the stream. Once the stream is off, Beyong asks Dokja how he knows about the star stream when he is just a human. In Dokja's memory, the star stream is a broadcast that spans the cosmos. It's a place where constellations from distant galaxies sign up, and the actors in the stream are people like Dokja. Dokkaebi are known as streamers and act as mediators between the constellations and the actors by telling their stories. Dokja, sitting casually, tells Beyong that it doesn't matter how he knows. Without giving Beyong a chance to respond, Dokja asks if Beyong wants to become the Dokkaebi king and beat other streamers like Dokjak and Gildal to be the best streamer ever. Dokja promises to make him the Dokkaebi king if he agrees to sign a contract with him. Beyong is stunned by what Dokja says. After a short moment, he starts laughing, telling Dokja that he has lost his mind. Beyong adds that he should have known something was off when Dokja turned down all the offers from the constellations. Beyong is right because Dokja didn't choose a constellation during the sponsor selection before the sub-scenario. Beyong tells Dokja that he doesn't know how Dokja knows about the star stream, but he can't accept the offer because he is a Dokkaebi and not a constellation. This means he can't support him. Dokja explains that he never asked Beyong to sponsor him, which leaves Beyong confused. Dokja clears up the misunderstanding, saying that he doesn't want Beyong's power but his channel, along with the stream contract. Dokja mentions the constellation's Dokkaebi stream contract. In this contract, a Dokkaebi can show the avatar of a constellation on their channel in exchange for a certain number of coins. The Dokkaebi who owns the channel gets a share of the coins the avatar earns. This idea makes Beyong laugh. Then, with his red eyes glowing in anger on his face, Beyong questions how a mere human dares to mention the Starstream contract, especially someone like Dokja, who doesn't even have a supporting constellation. Dokja explains that this is exactly why Beyong should take his offer, which leaves Beyong confused. He asks Dokja why constellations are even part of the Starstream feeds. Dokja knows that there are two main groups in the Starstream. One group likes to switch stations for an adrenaline rush. The second group is made up of avatar sponsors who are looking for avatars to support. Dokja suggests that Beyong should aim to thrill or attract avatar seekers to make his channel successful. Beyong, angry, asks why Dokja cares so much. Dokja calls Beyong dense and criticizes his low subscription numbers. He continues, asking Beyong to consider an avatar who turned down the supporting constellation. This avatar is able to outperform everyone else without needing a constellation. Hearing this, Beyong realizes what Dokja means. Dokja confirms that's the reason he didn't choose a supporting constellation. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment next part down below to see what happens next. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.